All right. Hello, everyone. This is the Kubernetes community meeting for August 2nd, 2018. I am Solly Ross. I'll be the moderator for today. As a quick reminder, this is recorded and will be made publicly available. So don't say anything that you wouldn't want your grandparents to hear. Also, as a quick request, if anyone would like to volunteer to take notes, that would be very much appreciated. All right, so first up, we have a demo of Kritis. So we'll jump right into that.
Sure. Hey, what's up? I'm going to try to share my screen, just maybe if anyone can verify that. Can people see this?
Yep, you are good to go.
Awesome. Okay. Alrighty. All right. Awesome. Just one second. My name is Aaron Prindle. I'm going to be talking about Kritis today. So let's jump right in. So Kritis is it's judge in Greek, and Kritis is built off of kind of Grapheus. So Grapheus is like an API spec for various container metadata, and Kritis is designed to kind of create policies on top of this metadata. So the goals for Kritis are to test assertions before you deploy containers, so people can kind of make certain like signatures or requirements on containers that they want deployed, and Kritis will like act on them. It plugs into your normal like admission control interface, like using validating hooks. So it's like kind of native to Kubernetes. Like one of the goals for Kritis is to be able to verify build provenance, so that you can guarantee that the images in your cluster are images that you've signed or someone has kind of verified as being okay. What we're going to kind of demo today is this vulnerability scanning component of Kritis, so that kind of operators of a cluster can verify that anything in your cluster has like an appropriate level of permissions that you've scoped. So you can say, I don't want any critical vulnerabilities in my cluster, and Kritis will, on each image that's deployed, check with like a CVE database, provided like it's going to be a Grapheus interface. Currently, it's in the demo, it's based on the container analysis API that's in GC, but like we're gonna get like it's designed to be built on top of Grapheus, and also Kritis like has a kind of cron or like a controller that's kind of continuously running, monitoring the images that are deployed to make sure that nothing gets too out of sync. And also Kritis is entirely open source. The repo is available now. We haven't done like an official release, but it's at Grapheus Kritis for all the stuff that we're gonna demo here. So kind of like the way that what Kritis operates on is it has a set of CRDs. So the one that we'll talk about today is this image security policy. And this image security policy, or ISP, is kind of how you configure Kritis for the level for the vulnerability piece. So we can kind of talk through some of the components here, but when you deploy Kritis on your cluster, you can specify a whitelist of images. So these are images that will kind of get a pass through regardless of like the state of the vulnerabilities that they have. So this supports like using tags or like a full digest. And I'll talk more about it later, but any image that isn't whitelist requires a digest, the way that Kritis is designed. So we have like tools to make sure that they kind of go and update all of your container images to be based on top of digest. Like it'll retag everything for you using digest instead of tags. Then you can specify like the kind of vulnerabilities you'll accept in your cluster. So like maybe you'll have a high tolerance, which would block out all critical vulnerabilities. Maybe you have a low tolerance, which will block out anything from low through high. And then you can also whitelist CVEs independently. So if there's certain known vulnerabilities that you're fine with in your cluster, you can allow those. So yeah, now so you go to the demo. Alrighty, just gonna see it going. All right, so here I just went and installed it, but so Kritis is currently it's a single Helm chart. So I've deployed this on a cluster. I just wanted to make sure everything was working. I added an ISP, and I can do the rest now. But so essentially, I've installed Kritis on a cluster, and what that looks like is we have our the one, like this is the hook that's running. so this will, so like the components here are, there's a validating webhook configuration that's gonna, with these two are called. So one is on any create or update of pods in the cluster, and one is on create or update of deployments in a cluster. So any kind of pod that I try to deploy is going to go through Kritis, the Kritis pod that I showed earlier. And then I've also, I have an ISP running, just like the one that I showed earlier. So Kritis is going to like look at this before it validates anything. So I'll show you a, like this is a deployment that I'm going to try to run that has a vulnerability, a known vulnerability in it. So this is like a Java container. So I'm going to try to run this against Kritis. And as you can see, so like it kind of, Kritis comes back and says that the deployment was denied because it found violations. And I mean, maybe it makes sense to kind of show those here, but from the logs, that there's like a bunch of vulnerabilities found in this image that you can kind of inspect and see what happened there. But so that's kind of like the base level of how Kritis is designed. I also, so right there, that's kind of like denying pods that have vulnerabilities. And the way that that's done is currently is using, sorry, it's like hard for me to see with the screen sharing. It interacts with the GCP. Right now it's container announcements, but essentially like when you deploy an image, it scans them for vulnerabilities. And then, so these like critical vulns here, this is, that's kind of what it's operating on. All right, so let's go back to the demo area. So here we also have some other, so here's like an image. This is like trying to deploy an Nginx image that has no digest available. So that means like, as you can see, I tagged it with this latest here. So if I try to deploy this, we should see that, sorry, that Kritis is not happy that it's not fully qualified. And we have a tool here. I think I talk about it, and I have a slide for it also. So to kind of get around this, like, so when you deploy a pod with Kritis, images have to be fully qualified with digest. This is necessary because like tags can change and Kritis might not get the right vuln information for something that has like a tag on it. So we have this resolves tag kube control plugin. So here, you can directly apply this to the pod, but I'll just kind of show you what. So I don't know if you remember, like if you cat this, the pod had the tag digest, but then this will go in and rewrite your YAML so that it has the appropriate digest on it. So if I were to still deploy with the digest, like in my ISP, so like that just kind of, it'll deny anything that doesn't have that. If you remember just from like what's in the whitelist that I currently deployed, we have like that digest is whitelisted. So to see actually something get admitted to through Kritis, we should be able to create something that's in the whitelist. Whoops. I think it's digest whitelist, and you'll see that it goes through like it's allowed as it's defined in the whitelist there. And so those are kind of like the primary components of Kritis. We can kind of. Excuse me, I didn't hear. Was that? I thought I heard something.
Hey, if you are not actively presenting, please mute yourself.
Sorry. So like this kind of like we have this resolves tags component, and we have the image vulnerability checking. So that kind of ends the demo. I don't know if anyone has any immediate questions. We're gonna kind of talk about some like events coming up and like kind of where the next roadmap is. So right now there's going to be a blog post posted on August 13th talking about kind of what the scope of Kritis is and what we kind of see going forward. And like along with that, we'll have the first official release of Kritis, and that will be packages a single Helm chart that you can deploy. So hopefully that'll be simple for people to try. So coming soon, I'd mentioned currently Kritis is coupled to like the container analysis API that's like on GCP, but like the reason we're just waiting until Grafeus is integrated into Claire, then it should be simple as like container analysis API is based off of Grafeus to integrate that as well. And we're also working on the idea of the authorization piece with attestation. So like these kind of having these custom policies that are built around this concept of attestations. There's links here. Once I share the slides, you can kind of investigate more. I try to link everything here, and that's kind of what Kritis is designed to do. So thanks for presenting. This is the repository you can look at, and definitely open to any questions anyone has.
Looks like we have some questions in chat. So
sure. I'm just gonna
there's a couple of questions.
For sure.
Austin asks, is it similar to Portieris? And does it support Notary?
Okay. Currently, I don't. Can you still hear me? I think I stopped sharing. Okay. Yes. Sorry, I lost the chat there. So I don't know much about Portieris, but I can definitely look into it. I'm not familiar with Portieris, but definitely worth like investigating more in that. I'm not quite sure. And then Notary, I think it's a bit different. So with kind of like the auth piece, I can definitely see like it definitely has a similar goal to Notary. This is kind of designed to be like native to kind of Kubernetes deployments. So we kind of have like a really good experience there with how you can install it in the primitives that it operates on, and making sure that nothing is ever blocked. Like you can imagine if you're running these like pods somewhere and there's other like add-ons or something being run in your destination, making sure that nothing bad ever happens to your cluster just because of how you set up your ISP stuff. All right. Awesome. Any other questions?
I think that's it.
Awesome.
I don't see anything else.
Great. Well, thank you guys.
All right. Thank you very much for presenting. Next up, we have some release updates. So I'll hand it over to Tim Pepper, who is the 1.12 release lead.
Hi, everybody. So one thing to note, first of all, is that our feature freeze passed this week on Tuesday. And just kind of the standing reminder, this isn't like implementation freeze or code freeze. That comes later in the cycle. This is just the feature definition freeze where we're collecting information on what is to come. The code freeze is not until September 4th, so almost 5 weeks away. Then the other thing just to mention to folks is that we cut our alpha. It finally came out yesterday. It was slightly delayed, and you may have also seen on the 1.11 branch a few hiccups. There's really a significant change going on right now, kind of this last month or so, where the mechanics of the process for releasing the actual turning the crank and doing the build, doing the release, publishing things out onto the web. That mechanism is changing significantly such that instead of requiring a Google employee to run it, now a community member can. So this is a really huge transition, and we're working out some kinks, but I think it's really coming together, and expect now going forward that the beta release for 1.12 should be in good shape from that perspective. And in the minutes, there is a link, bit.ly Kates112-release-info if you want more information on where we are.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Do we have any of the patch release maintainers on the line as well? Do we have any updates there?
If Anirudh's not on the line, I'll mention he'd sent out an email yesterday noting that the 1.11.2 patch release is scheduled for August 7th. So that's the announcement's out on the KDev mailing list, and he's doing his standard call for information on anything that needs cherry picked. He'd like those by end of day tomorrow, Friday, August 3rd.
Awesome, thank you. So next up, we have the KEP of the week. So for people who don't know, just a quick introduction, the KEP of the Week is our section where we talk a little bit about an ongoing KEP in the community that the authors want to share around more broadly. So this week we have dynamic audit configuration.
Let me share my screen real quick. Everyone, I'm Patrick with FDU. We are working on making auditing dynamic in Kubernetes, at least the configuration of it. So the motivation here is obviously advanced auditing is really awesome. It gives you a lot of tools. It's still kind of difficult to configure. Requires you getting into the API server, setting a lot of flags, copying files up there. So we're working to make it to where it's just an API object that you can apply kind of in the same vein of dynamic admission control. So this KEP just got merged. It involves both webhooks and policy. Obviously, KEPs are designed to be an ongoing discussion. So if you have any more feedback, definitely reach out with it. So it looks pretty similar to what you'd see in dynamic admission today. You have the ability to configure a lot of the webhook options. Some of those are left for the API server flags. You can have multiple definitions of this. So you would have a policy linked to a backend that can exist in multiple definitions. They'd all just send out two different webhooks. Here's an example of the YAML. It's pretty basic. Couple of user stories we're targeting is cluster admin that wants to quickly apply auditing to his cluster, but he wants to prevent privilege escalation. So one of the ways we're doing that is you can still set the audit configuration through the runtime flags that can never be tampered with. It is also gated by a runtime flag in general, which is just audit dynamic configuration. So you can turn that on and off if you don't feel comfortable with it on your cluster. Kubernetes developer that wants to just drop in extensions that utilize audit data. Cluster admin with multiple audit policies that send out to independent auditing facilities. A developer that may want to just turn up auditing on a certain area of the application, just to quickly debug what's going on with what they're building. Couple of notes as we're going into this. Advanced auditing is moving into GA in 1.12. So we're doing a lot of work to make sure we don't affect the GA release of that and just make sure it's properly feature gated. Policy enforcement, this is a pretty big change to the current audit pipeline. It's going to require us basically having policies enforced per sync. There's some potential performance impacts that we talked about in the risk mitigation section. Those are largely mitigated, at least for us going into alpha, just by the fact that it is feature gated, but it's something we're going to have to benchmark as we go forward. Aggregated servers would just work off basically the same objects, and they would only watch for types they care about. Privilege escalation piece I already kind of talked about, leaked resources. This is something we need to probably do a little documentation on, which is basically if I apply or give someone the rights to apply an audit policy, they could write themselves a policy that would allow them to read all the secrets in the cluster or really any data in the cluster. So we need to make sure it's at least communicated that this is a cluster admin level privilege, and that's part of why we have the runtime flag as well to gate it, because some cluster admins may not be comfortable with it. That largely mitigates that concern. So we're shooting for alpha in 1.12 and hopefully beta in 1.13. And yeah, that's if you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out. Like I said, we just merged this, but it's kind of an ongoing document. If there's any features you'd like to see going forward, definitely reach out to us. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And anybody else that's sponsoring or working on a KEP, if you are interested in sharing your KEP with the broader community, feel free to sign up for this next week or whenever you are able to present.
I just want to pile onto that KEP real quick if I can, Solly.
Go ahead.
One of the reasons I particularly am interested in dynamic audit log configuration is because it may be one way to allow us to collect API coverage of our system level tests. Right now, you don't, like when you stand up a cluster, you can't actually change the audit policy at all. So we really want to be able to, for any given cluster, like turn on an audit log, go get the audit log, and use that to compute API coverage. So this is super exciting stuff. Thank you so much for moving the ball forward on this, Patrick.
Cool. All right. Next up, we have Sig Updates. So we have 2 Sig Updates this week. The first is Sig UI. So take it away, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So Sig UI, for those of you that don't know, Sig UI is essentially Kubernetes dashboard. So there's that. There's a new release coming up soon, probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. The main things of note, a lot of bug fixes that have been coming in, and we're updating the version of Client Go and a couple other Go dependencies. That'll move the ball forward when it comes to our compatibility matrix, because we try to per version of the dashboard hit 3 versions of Kubernetes. So the last version of Kubernetes, the current one, and the future one. It actually mirrors Client Go, and that's actually what we version against. So when the new release comes out, right now the current release is 1.8.3. The new version of the dashboard should be 1.10, because that's the version of Client Go we're going with. So the big thing, the thing that we've been working on the most is actually migrating Angular. The current version of Angular is Angular 1. I hear that's outdated. We're moving to Angular 6. That's actually, new and supported. It has involved completely rewriting the dashboard front end from scratch. This alone is a Herculean effort that's been done by very few people, and we have to bless them and thank them. But unfortunately, we're in a split brain state, because we have a lot of effort going towards this Angular migration, but we're also still doing a bunch of bug fixes on Angular 1 and the Go packages behind everything. So we're actually going to rip the Band-Aid off. After the current or the upcoming release, we're going to achieve as much feature parity as possible in the Angular migration, and then cut a release so it's all on the new Angular version. This might mean that there are a couple features that aren't working that were, but almost all of the basic functionality that you're used to will be there. And then once we've merged the brains, we'll just go through and start patching things as issues come in. On the horizon, a lot of people are asking about OAuth 2 as authentication against the dashboard. Some people have asked if they can work on PRs. We hear you. If you want to work on that, please submit that and we'll look at it. We also want to simplify pulling Docker images, because a lot of people are having trouble if they're running, say, on Raspberry Pis. They have to specify the ARM version of the image, and then we're releasing multiple different architectures. So let's just make it a multi-architecture manifest and push that up, so you won't have to specify your architecture. And also, a blog post came out recently showing 22,000 insecure dashboards. We want to try and address that. That's something that we're talking about internally. Things as simple as along the top of the dashboard, hey, your dashboard might be running insecure. You should mitigate this. Or, hey, your dashboard is running as, the kube admin role. Are you sure you want to do that? So that's kind of the long story short version of how things are. There was sort of a staff shortage a few months ago, and then things are starting to ramp up. So you're going to see a bunch more movement. This is actually what the Angular migration looks like. You'll also notice that it has a dark theme. We're working on both a dark theme, the normal light theme that you're used to, and in the future, you'll be able to actually customize your CSS so you can do things like, slightly brand it. So that's good. As always, if you want to contribute, this is the repo that we live in. The main things we're working on, again, are that Angular JS migration. Lots of bugs have been coming in, so triaging those, and then feature discovery, because dashboard, I think, has a lot of room to grow As Kelsey said, you're not going to be using kubectl to really interact with the Kubernetes. I think a lot more people can start interacting with the dashboard once we start doing things like supporting custom apps in it and plugins. So also, we are always in Slack and we're fairly responsive. And just so everyone understands, I really have no idea what I'm doing. And I also have to have a meme in every single thing that I do. So that's me. Any questions or comments?
There was a request for emoji support in the dashboard. This is very important, and I feel the need to highlight it.
George, I think I will talk to you about that this weekend.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Next up, we have Sig Service Catalog.
Hey, I don't have any slides, so I'll make some after this because I just signed up to do this update. So I didn't have time to make a slide deck, but a couple of high-level updates for the SIG. We recently had our SIG charter approved. So now we have an official SIG charter that codifies a lot of things that are kind of going to feed into the next set of updates. So first, we have a switch in our SIG chairs. So Aaron from Microsoft and Vile from Google have stepped down, and they've been replaced by Carolyn from Microsoft and Michael from Google. So the SIG charter kind of lines out how the chair maintenance is going to go on, and also how we're going to bring on new contributors. So along that line, we're working actively to improve the contributor experience in Service Catalog. That is being handled by a couple of things. We've implemented some good guidance on like what a good PR should look like. We've been active in labeling issues with like good first issue and other things to solicit new contributors to come in. We're also moving to PROW thanks to the SIG testing team. That's made it a lot easier for us to handle reviews quicker, handle automated testing and retesting when we have test flakes, things like that. And then the last update I'll give is that we have a couple of new features that have landed fairly recently. Not all of them have been ungated yet, but some of the capabilities they're providing are allowing you to use Service Catalog in a more Kubernetes way, I guess. Before we had kind of scoped everything at the cluster level, and it didn't really fit into how you might want to use your cluster with namespaces in RBAC. So we have recently introduced namespace broker resources. So you can do things like register a broker inside of a single namespace and then use RBAC to correctly limit who can provision what services. Along with that, we've also introduced some catalog restrictions. So if you're a cluster admin, you've got like 5 different teams that want to use brokers, you can limit which services get exposed into those namespaces so you have better control over what's being provisioned. We're also working right now actively on defining a higher level abstraction that will allow you to define default types. So some of the complexity that goes into using Service Catalog right now is that you have to know the class names, the plans, and sometimes the parameters for like what you're going to provision. So it kind of raises the bar to entry a little bit. So if I'm a developer building a service and I want to use Service Catalog, I still need to know a little bit more than just I need MySQL or I just need Postgres. So we're working towards providing default types so that as a cluster administrator, I can say, here is what MySQL should look like. Here's what Postgres should look like. So then as a service developer, you can just say, I need MySQL and Postgres, and the provisioning will happen for you automatically. Cool. So those are the updates I wanted to give. I'll put a slide deck with the stuff and links to issues later and insert it into the agenda. Thanks.
That's awesome. I look forward to slides later too. All right. So next up, we have some announcements. Do you want to handle those, George?
Sure. Just 2 announcements. KubeCon CFP deadline is August 12th. So please get them in. That gives you about 2 weeks, 10 days. And another save the date, the Monday that KubeCon starts. And the previous Sunday, we're going to have another contributor summit. We don't yet have a link for you with the content that we're going to provide, but we will be providing content for existing contributors and for new contributors who are looking to get their first contributions in. And the Sunday, which is usually the travel day, the day before, we're looking at having like a social function, an optional social function for people that want to meet each other before the event starts.
Awesome. Look forward to seeing people there. All right. So I apologize if there were any shoutouts that were listed in the shoutouts channel. It looks like they did not get populated. So I'll give some time for people to populate those and flip over to our Stack Overflow top users. So at the end of the month, we collect the top users in Stack Overflow, answering Kubernetes related questions. So thanks to Jack Storm, Matthew L. Daniel, Nicola Ben, David Mays, Konstantin Bustin, VAS Von C, Michael Hausenblaus, Const, and Marcin Romas Zewitz. I'm pretty sure I butchered that. My Polish pronunciation is not amazing. All right, it looks like we got some shout outs populated. So thanks to MHB for his efforts working with SIG testing to get the service catalog all hooked up to Prow and Tide. Thanks to T Pepper, Defi, Ben the Elder, and RDO Dev for great responses and their time on Me, our contributors yesterday. Thanks to NeoLit123 for quick responses and status updates for failing CI tests for cluster lifecycle, and many thanks to Amit for quick reviews of changes to Kubernetes, the Kubernetes examples repo. And be sure, if you have someone who has made your life easier, made your day, been really helpful to you, mention them on Pound Shoutouts on Slack, and we will thank them in the next meeting. Does anybody else have any other announcements that they would like to make?
Actually, I got one more. Just to kind of jump the gun a little bit, this is sort of release 112 related. But we're going to turn off the Milestone maintainer munger. It's part of my mission to get rid of Munge GitHub, and that's one of the things we'd just rather not port to Prow. So if you're not familiar with it, it's the thing that every time you open an issue and try to get it added to the latest release milestone, you get yelled at for not having kind, priority, or SIG labels on your issue, because the release team really wants that. And going forward, we're going to try and find ways to improve and motivate people to improve labeling hygiene. But we found that the bot generates a lot of noise. So I know the release team is super happy about this because suddenly they're not going to get notified every day on like 50 different issues. But I think contributors might find that they're going to get yelled at a lot less by a bot. But please do be a lot more forgiving to issue maintainers or bug triage leads from the release team. I know Guinevere Sanger is one of them, Jeremy Rickard, and a couple other are acting as shadows. So if humans start pinging you directly about your issues a little more often than maybe you were used to, it's because we turned off a bot to try and save people spam.
Less spam is always good. All right. If no one else has any announcements they'd like to make.
I have one more.
Oh,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Parris.
Hey. Hi, everyone. It's Parris. For all SIG chairs, team leads, and everyone that runs a Zoom meeting, you have mail in the SIG leads distro. It's very important that you understand this information. Also, to those who are interested in getting involved with contributor experience activities, we are looking for plenty of new contributors. We have tons of activities going on right now. Lots of stuff going on our mailing list. Join our meetings, things like a new contributor site, a communication platform consolidation, moderation, etc. So please join us. Thank you.
All right. And with that, after a relatively short meeting, I think we'll give everyone back a half an hour. See you all next week.